as much as I tend to take cheap shots at Super, it's not as though I abandoned all hope as soon as the franchise's revival started. In fact, Battle of Gods presented a great step at revitalizing the franchise despite the flaws of its narrative. And yes, there's quite a few, but that's a topic for another time. This wasn't through such things as a new wall to surpass Symbirus or the Super Saiyan God transformation, but in the reveal of there being a multiverse outside of the video games. This opened up near endless possibilities for challenges to the Dragon Team, as well as a very organic way to introduce such opponents, with the heights Goku had already reached. The only way to keep that going within the Dragon universe we know would be introducing someone more talented than Gero in his field, and with greater resources, and without rehashing GT's ideas, or copying those of the Cell arc, Beerus's reveal of the multiverse was the right direction, on paper. As of now, only 2 of Super's arcs have focused on these other universes. 3 if counting Zamasu's role, though the majority of his arc's conflict centers around one of Universe 7's timelines, with the 4 most recent main threats being purely those within Universe 7. This alone shows how underutilized the multiverse is in Super, but it gets even more apparent when going over how the 2 arcs focused on this concept executed it. Starting with Universe 6, I'll at least give it credit for one that's a direct parallel to Universe 7, not doing the modern trend of just having a pariah character be changed to whatever those involved want with no caution for internal logic. That's Dragon Ball Hero's job after all. Yes, I'm saying this remembering Frost, but I'll get to him. Things such as showing how the Saiyans have become when having a naturally more peaceful nature are good ideas, and 60% of the team facing Universe 7 in their introduction aren't parallel or composite versions of other characters at least. The main issue with their role though is how little it's expanded on despite the potential given. In particular, it sets up in no uncertain terms a master-student relationship between Vegeta and Kappa, and thereby opens up exploration for Universe 6's Saiyans, tying into Vegeta's character growth, especially with the teasing of him one day meeting the Universe 6 equivalent of either himself or his father. We still have yet to see this delivered on, and with the direction Vegeta's arc has gone since becoming purely focused on his own universe's opponents, such as Broly and Frieza, it seems Cabba's role will just be left to the wayside. Hit is another major example of unfulfilled potential, in Goku going so far as to forfeit in hopes of having a battle where he's not limited to the rules of the tournament. And that seemed to have gone out the window as soon as Hit got demolished by Jiren. The anime at least allowed for a Goku vs Hit no-holds-barred rematch, but the execution of it was lukewarm at best, with its placement in what's essentially a filler segment. The missed potential was also apparent with Frost. The unnerving aspect of a just Frieza was a good direction for Universe 7's parallel twin, but this is made pointless with the bait and switch of him being just like Frieza. He ended up serving more of a purpose for Frieza's character arc in the Tournament of Power, with him representing Frieza having to not even trust who he once was, if wishing to cultivate himself to the level of surpassing Goku again. But that still ends up reducing Frost's role to a punching bag mirror. Speaking of that tournament, the Tournament of Power offered far more variety for exploring the multiple settings, and it ended up with most of the other universes just amounting to one gimmick each. It at least makes sense for Universe 11 to be just the Pride Troopers. But when you have things such as Universe 2's entire team all being obsessed with beauty, or being the most basic parodies of Mahou Shoujo, or Universe 3 being mainly various mechas or super robots, remove the potential variety when you compare them to Universe 7, or even Universe 6. And often make it apparent which ones were designed as throwaways, with only Universe 11, and 6 to some extent, being integral to the narrative as opposed to Universe 7. Their tertiary role wouldn't be as much of an issue if not for going against the arc's premise of a battle royale that could allow for many to prove a viable threat when more than the typical tournament, rather than amounting to Universe 7 versus Jiren, as well as the stakes of an entire universe being raised becoming irrelevant to the audience beyond that of Universe 7, which obviously couldn't happen, and maybe 6, when the other universes don't have their characters or settings fleshed out enough for their loss to have much impact. As an example of how to execute similar ideas, take the manga Battle Angel Alita: Last Order. The Zenith of Finn's tournament is also one with a multitude of characters, competing for a chance of salvation from their current situations, but the difference is most of the teams faced by Alita's team have their background and psychology explored thoroughly enough to make the audience conflicted about how much they want the protagonist to win. It's not as though Dragon Ball is averse to this conflict either, as even the far lower stakes of Goku vs Namu executes this idea solidly enough, as I've mentioned before. But the most that we get for the universes outside of those we're familiar with is manga Jiren's desire to revive Gichin, which still isn't explored anywhere near enough to give the audience sympathy to place it anywhere close to the loss of other universes. The third major aspect which limited its effectiveness were the Hakaishin beyond Beerus. Knowing they exist as well as how close in power Beerus was to Champa in the manga flashback and super anime, opened up the possibility that perhaps Beerus isn't the strongest of them, and opened up a new hurdle once Goku and Vegeta reached his level. Of course, this wasn't the case, with it turned out he is the strongest of them, and has an ability for attempted justification of him staying ahead of them, which ultimately destroyed the narrative role of most of them beyond an obligation before it could begin. After that, using the other universes to bring in greater challenges was abandoned, with no signs of it being used anytime soon. Ultimately, a major part of why Super's power creep is so obviously egregious in its recent arcs especially, is the lack of the multiverse's constant use or exploration as a springboard for new stories that reduce Battle of God's best idea to Super's biggest of many great swings with poor misses. Thank you for watching up to this point. If wanting to see another case of a major failing of Super linked to its other universes, perhaps you'd be interested in this comparison between Baby and Zamasu. Subscribe if wanting to stay updated on the next Dragon Ball analysis. Check out this playlist of previous ones, and I'll see you in the next video.